Hello everyone. Today's video talks about PEGA and its integration with a content management system called jFrog Artifactory. Now, what is the need to have a separate content management system and what are the use cases we are trying to achieve here? That is something I would first go through. First, normally let me just explain how it works without any kind of external integration. If you don't have any special configuration made, whenever you're creating a case, and whenever you're attaching files on it, normally what happens is they all go into PEGA's own tables. Now, if I give you an example, that will probably make it simpler to understand. So I have a case here called case type 1. I'm adding some description to it and I'm creating the case. It has no screens in it. But if I, for example, attach a file called sample PDF and I name the file as sample PDF xxx and I submit it. Now, whenever I'm submitting it, the data for this attachment automatically is saved within PEGA's own tables. Now, what are those tables? I will give you a list here. You can see these table names. The first table is PC work document, which stores information. You can see this file that I have just created. PEGA also internally creates a new case of case type PEGA social document, and you can see the case information here. It also has a linkage table which links it to another table which is called the actual content table. So you can see here that it actually gives the case ID on which the case was created, on the attachment was made, and it also has the social PEGA social document case ID as well. And this table has the information, the actual blob or the actual document content that I'm actually uploading. So these three tables are the primary ones where we are storing the PEGA's attachments. Now, that is the usual way of doing it. Now, if you, for example, don't do anything and you just have a basic vanilla application, this is how it's going to work. Now, what is the need then to have a separate content management system? Now, the need comes in primarily two scenarios. One is you have a huge number of cases being created and they have huge number of attachments in it. So what then happens is your number of attachments starts to grow, and you then have millions and millions of records. Also, all of those files also have its own size, which means that your schema size becomes much more bigger and much larger, which in turn makes your database connectivities a bit more difficult. So it is always best to outsource those attachments or all the files that you have into an external system who has their own infrastructure, and they can also manage your content. Number one. The number two scenario where it is usually used is you're working for a multinational company or a bank. Then those companies or banks have their own internal compliance or their internal contracts with some external connecting teams, and they in turn manage their content. So then whenever you are going into that bank, you are obligated to actually have your application attachments put into Artifactory or any other system. So in this usual scenarios are where you actually going to be using an external storage of your attachments of your cases. How we are going to do it, we will explore it in the next part of our video. Before we do any configurations or anything else in PEGA, we first need to set up our infrastructure, which is outside PEGA, where the actual Artifactory would be stored, right? So for that, we have to use some tools which will then allow us to do so. Now, again, there are many tools in the market. There is also, I think, Amazon S3, which can be used. I have not used it because I think that requires a separate license. I've used a free tool called jFrog Artifactory, as I mentioned. I will use that. So what I will do first is I will first go to Google and search with jFrog login. It will give me a link. I have my ID and password saved here. I've already created it. Now, as you can see, this actually gives me a very basic screen, but there is a cluster which I have created before. Now this cluster I will open. Right. Now I have now logged into the jFrog Artifactory, and you will see that I have already created a cluster. Now the cluster creation is actually very easy. You can find it anywhere in Google how to do it, and you can simply follow the steps given within JFrog Artifactory. Now what I've done here is I've created a new I mean like a new artifact called generic cosmos generic local, which I'm actually going to be using. Now creating an artifact is also very simple. You can simply click on here and you can click on this generic type, which I have used. You can also use Docker and Maven or npm. I have not used them, but I use the generic one. And again, for example, create something like this. This effectively serves as your base location under which all your documents will be saved. So whenever you click on this generic cosmos generic local, although the name might be a bit weird, but if you, for example, look at this, it actually has some information underneath it. Now once this is configured, then we will start to create something within PEGA. What are those steps? Let's find out. Now that we have created our infrastructure where we would store our documents, our next step would be to come into PEGA and then do the necessary configurations, which will allow PEGA to also connect to the external cluster inside JFrog Artifactory, which we have created. So let's start doing that. So first thing that you have to do is you have to go to sysadmin and create something called a repository. I'll see if I can create one. Since we're going to use JFrog, so let's term it as, I don't know, JFrog 1 or something. Now here you have to select which type of repository we will use. Now there are, like as I have said before, you can also use Azure or Amazon S3. I have not tried that out. I can of course try it out maybe at a later point of time, but I have used JFrog Artifactory for this one. So let's use this for the moment. So whenever you select JFrog Artifactory, you need to give certain information about it. So first is the host ID, second is repository key, and third is authentication profile. Now what exactly is authentication profile? I'll start with this first. Authentication profile is the means by which PEGA would connect to that host that we are using to store the documents. Now the information would be present here. Now the host ID of course is the part of it's a domain name on which we have our infrastructure located, and repository key effectively is the artifact name under which your documents will be stored. So if I, for example, go back here, you will see that if I refresh it once, this is the artifact I have created before. You have this URL. Now let me just copy this. Now let me just copy them both here, but they are not required. So you can see here that not everything would be required. So here everything before Artifactory needs to be like this, and here everything after Artifactory needs to be like this. PEGA would fill in the extra slashes that we have to add in. So let me just save this first, but as it says, you also need to give an authentication profile. So I will give an authentication profile which would effectively signal the credentials by which PEGA would connect to JFrog. Now let me create one. I would create a basic one, basic authentication type, and I will give the same ID and password which I had used before to connect to this. I will use my email address. And then save it. So once this is saved, this can now be used. So I will save this now again. So this is now saved. So once this is saved, we need to check whether the connection actually works within PEGA and the Artifactory server that we have. So let's do test connectivity. As you can see, test connectivity works. It says success and response matches says authenticated, which means the authentication also works. And there's another button here called validate repository. Now what does this do? What it does is it actually goes into Artifactory and checks whether all of the actions are possible, which means that it can check whether a file exists, it can create a new file, it can delete a file, it can update a file, things like that. So let's try that out and see whether all the actions which are required to store a file there are possible and are permissible or not. As you can see, all of them are saying is good, which means that the user that I have has all the accesses required. Now there is no extra features required, but whenever we are creating a new ID, if you for example are using a new ID, then you probably have to add new IDs here. So as you can see, the ID that I used to create this artifact already has all the necessary permissions. But if you create a new ID, you probably have to add it, all the permissions here. Now this means that the connectivity is now set. So let me save this and let me go back to the place where the application would have the connection with the repository. So what I will do is I will go to the application definition and go to the integration tab of it. Now here you can see that the content storage is actually said that everything is stored in PEGA database, but this will have to change. So I will select store in repository and select the one that we have used, jFrog 1, and it also asks you to select a folder underneath the repository where it will be stored. So I will simply select the one that we already had. You can also conditionally create multiple folders underneath it and then use that to store your documents. And then I will save this. So this means now whatever cases are created within this application, whatever attachments they have will now automatically go into PEGA's new Artifactory folder that we have created. So I'll just log off and log in just to be sure, and then create a new case. So let me just first check whether there's any documents, anything which is already created. No, I think it's completely blank. You can see there is no documents, anything underneath it. I will now create a case. This is an existing case type I had used to do some other POCs before. So I have now created a case. I will now upload a document. So again, I will select the one that I have used before, sample PDF. It's a sample file which I have downloaded from the internet. You can also do it. Sample PDF, name it with XYZ, I don't know, anything. Now you can of course give in some other information, but I will not do it here. I will simply submit it. Once the submission is done, this automatically has pushed the documents into Artifactory. So let's see if it's there or not. As you can see, a document has now been pushed. So that is effectively what PEGA provides out of the box. And you don't of course have to do any other things. It is automatically saved. Now there are certain limitations which what PEGA provides. For example, one thing I noticed which is a bit of a downer is, if you for example have this document created, suppose now you choose to delete the document from here in PEGA. If you delete it and you save the case, the document is not automatically deleted. It always remains. So as you can see here, the document is permanently archived here. So ideally, PEGA should have put in some sort of a feature which will allow PEGA will then again automatically to delete the file from this folder, but it does not allow it. Although there is, for example, a data page which allows it. I actually have found this. Not a data page. Sorry, I actually have a separate jFrog Artifactory link which I have actually used within Postman. So you can see this Postman folder here, and I can give in the document name. So whatever link this is, you can get it from Artifactory directly. I'll close this. You can go to the document, you can find this URL, copy it. You can just save this here, and you can of course sorry, I don't think this would work. I think I made a mistake. Oh no, sorry, this is correct. So I saved I actually have this URL here, and I also have the username password configured. So I will simply hit this URL. It says 204 no content. So if you go back to this folder, you will see that the document is now gone. So you can also do that kind of a thing from Postman. Now if you can do it from Postman, chances are we can also do it from PEGA also. So it's just a matter of getting this URL, which is slightly more tedious because PEGA does not store the actual URL which is sent back from Artifactory. So there are certain challenges while doing some extra features, but I simply explained what an out of the box Artifactory management would be like. Now, if for example anyone wants to go and check, for example, what the actual document is, PEGA actually provides certain data pages. There is one called px get file, this one. So what you can do is it's out of the box final data page. You can simply run it, and you can give the repository name. Now I'll select, I think jFrog1 was the name, and the file path. Again, the file path, be a bit careful that the file path is not the entire path, it's just the name of the file. I'll see if I can get that. It's the name of the file. Oh, I have now deleted it. Let me push one more file and then we can try that out. So you can see the file name here, sample PDF doc. So for example, if you go and give this value, you can also, for example, give a response type. Now response type can be either stream or string. String gives you a base64 encoded string back. But if you can, if you give stream, then it will give you the actual content of that file directly as a stream of value. Now, if you choose this, sorry, I think it's jFrog1 like this. Yeah. As you can see here, the contents are actually sent back as in the form of a string. So you can also, for example, use these existing data pages. There are, I think, other data pages, for example, one to create a new folder, one to get the check whether the file exists. I will give a link of all the data pages that are present, and or if someone requires it, just ping me. But normally what happens is you can also use these to have some out of the extra custom features which you need. So for example, if there's any requirement on your application to get these documents from outside the case context, then you can simply use this data page and then get the information back and then show it to the user as an example perhaps. So this is how you do it. There are other ways of doing it also. There are some other, for example, the delete feature is something that PEGA should have given, but I see that it's not working that way. So I can, for example, create a component and then simply add that the delete rest file directly within PEGA, and then let's say distribute that if ever required. But usually it should already be there, but it's not that. So what we can do is we can actually, for example, whenever we are trying to delete a file, we can have this data page called, and that will then delete the file directly from it. So some sort of an extension can be found to make this work. But as of now, this is what I wanted to explain. If I, for example, explore this further, and if I find some new features to be tried out, I will definitely try it out. And that is about it. If you have any other questions on it, please reach out to me, or otherwise like, share, subscribe. Thank you.